Food prices are up for multiple reasons, some obvious and some not so obvious. Food prices have risen nearly 12% just since August. How high will they go, and are we already seeing clearly hidden shortages? What shortages are looming on the horizon that we will soon see? In this video, we're going to take a critical look at the inflamed pain points of our food supply and what you should be watching for in your area. Most importantly, I will tell you exactly what you can do now to brace yourself and prepare yourself for even higher prices and shortages in the future. Download the Start Preparing Survival Guide to help you prepare for any disaster. I'll post a link in the description and comments section below, or visit cityprepping.com/get started for a free guide to help you get started on your journey of preparedness. Pain points. The food supply has several problems. Even if harvest yields are up, that is no guarantee that the product will get to market. Soybeans are a perfect example of this at the moment. Typically, more than half of the U.S. soybean exports traverse the Mississippi River, and this year's harvest is one of the sole agricultural bright spots in an otherwise dismal harvest season. Decreased water levels on the Mississippi are reducing barges and driving up the prices of barge shipments. That in turn drives up the cost of soybeans. The further you are from locally sourcing your food, the more dramatic the impact of future shortages and soaring price increases will be. We cover food quite a bit on this channel because it is essential to preparedness and survival. Beyond the small cupboard that passes for a pantry in modern homes, you have to have local level food that you're accessing, stored supplies of nutritionally dense foods that you can cook and eat. You should be growing something to supplement your food supplies. Recently, the most prominent pain points for the food supply chain have been the global recession and pandemic disruptions. Lockdowns disrupted nearly every part of the food supply chain, including production, processing, and retail. At one point, laborers were in short supply. At another time, skilled meat processors were in short supply due to COVID. At one point, the meat was in good supply, but there was a lack of styrofoam trays to package it on for sale. The most significant impact was the shift from restaurants to people eating at home. For instance, milk producers who supplied schools with 7.5% of all milk sold in the United States, they suddenly had more product than they could sell after school closures. You might remember the ketchup package shortage during the lockdowns. There was plenty of ketchup in the supply chains, but there was a shortage of the individual serving packets necessary for the soaring takeout food industry. Finding agricultural field workers was also a problem during this period, which made it more challenging for farmers and increased their costs. This may all seem minor, and individually they probably are, but combined, they reverberate across the supply chain, taking the price of food to new highs. Manufacturers adjust their output, all the while guessing future demand. The typical rule of supply and demand driving price is less accurate. Supply can be way up, demand the same, but the price can still skyrocket. Another pain point has been distribution. The supply lines snarling to an almost halt, ports backing up, and imports and exports plummeting all put upward pressure on prices. Once prices go up, they rarely go down. Then there needed to be more truckers. Now there are unfounded rumors of a diesel shortage. Regardless of the validity of these rumors, there is no denying that the price of diesel will continue to rise for the foreseeable future. This price increase will eventually trickle down to the products that you purchase. Rising barge costs are due to scant rain leading to dwindling water depths. This leads to fewer barges operating, and the high costs of that translate into your food. It also reduces exports, which hampers the economy and results in inflation. Finally, there are some severe problems with agriculture. Summer droughts and heat have taken a hefty toll on American crops. In an earlier video, we covered how California rice production is half this year what it is typically. This multi-decade mega drought resulted in low harvest for corn, wheat, tomatoes, strawberries, lettuce, melons, carrots, sweet potatoes, celery, sorghum, feed grains, and so many more. Lack of water has left some farmers to have to make difficult choices about what to grow and what to let die. Ranchers must decide between current prices for meat and rising prices for feed grains and water bills. There are challenges up and down the food supply chain. In some cases, there is an improvement, like the plentiful soybean harvest, but compounding problems like distribution and processing complicate the future. Global problems. Low yields are a global problem, as adverse weather has brought shrinking harvest. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a major agricultural export of wheat, sent the price of wheat, soy, sunflower, and corn to near records. Ukraine, the breadbasket of the Black Sea that feeds much of that side of the world, has seen its exports decline by nearly 50%. Russian exports are obviously challenged as well. The shaky truce between the warring countries to allow exports has allowed just a paltry amount of agricultural products to flow. This same year, poor weather reduced agricultural yields in China, India, South America, and Europe. This has led both China and India to begin hoarding and stockpiling grain, reducing the overall supply. There's also the rising cost of fertilizer to contend with. Much of the fertilizer produced comes as a byproduct of natural gas, which is obviously in challenging supply from Russia. Mined fertilizer like potash is a diesel-intensive operation. Both of these forms of fertilizer have seen input costs skyrocket. That has driven up current and future prices of fertilizer, forcing many farmers to scale back their planting. There are also reported shortages of other agrochemicals like herbicides and fungicides. This too drives up input costs and lowers agricultural output. Globally, there are significant and simultaneous agricultural disruptions. Typically, if you have a dearth of one product because of the poor harvest that your country uses, like soybeans, you merely import more from another country. In this case, the U.S. could step up because our soybean harvest has been one of the only bright spots in a dismal harvest season. However, the barge traffic on the Mississippi is so costly and slowed because of the low levels of the river that getting it to ports to export is dramatically slowed. Not to mention the relationship between China and the United States, which is strained at the moment. Then there are also less affluent countries dependent upon foreign crop aid. Less agricultural products are flowing to these areas. This has prompted the UN World Food Program to warn of a tsunami of hunger and the real and dangerous risk of multiple famines this year. Is there a solution? Any way you examine the current predicament, there are more problems than usual, and there are more compounding problems than typical. Every single problem exacerbates the other. Agricultural executives indicate that global grain and oilseed markets need 2 consecutive normal crop years to stabilize global supplies. But do we have 2 years of stability in our future? Not at the moment. With each of these crises forming a large polycrisis, one has to wonder if there's a solution at all. By the end of the 22-23 crop year, the world's buffer stocks of corn will be enough for just 80 days worth of consumption, down 28% from 5 years ago. As this strained global food supply continues, more countries will reduce exports, thereby also reducing their economy. More nations will hoard what grain they can produce or acquire. While one crisis could allow the world to pivot out of it, all of these crises combined make it more difficult to find a single solution. In fact, it makes a global supply more susceptible to the impact of future disasters. One significant weather event at a time, when the global food supply is already so battered, can knock us even further away from ever regaining global food stability. At the very least, we are looking at years and years of higher prices. The world is currently heading toward the tightest grain inventories in years, and the time of abundance might not return anytime this decade. Fiat currency will buy less of a product that is in reduced supply, and that's a recipe for even higher prices still. There is currently no solution plugged in that would stabilize prices anywhere. There's no solution plugged in that would allow producers to lower prices in the future. Economies are continuing to struggle, and the high price of fertilizer, diesel, seed grain, and agrochemicals will continue to drive costs up further, reducing output and increasing prices. If the weather was Goldilocks good for the next several years, the war in Ukraine ended amicably tomorrow, and China and India, which account for a full third of the world's population, stopped hoarding the grain and resumed pre-pandemic levels of exports, maybe we could right this ship. That's a long list of things that need to go perfectly right when compared to just one major thing that can still go wrong: bad weather, a nuclear event, a continuing and escalating war, etc. What should you do? So that's a litany of problems with the global food supply. As I look at it, there are not really a lot of bright spots. The revolutionary advances in agriculture over the last 100 years have peaked at this point. The same agriculture that brought us copious amounts of food greatly narrowed our palates and biodiversity. The entire world's food supply depends on about 150 plant species, and just 12 of those provide 75% of the world's food. More than half of the world's food energy comes from just 3 crops: rice, wheat, and corn. All 3 of these crops are at dramatic lows right now. Supplementing the land with fertilizers and herbicides increase the amount of food produced, but other methods like crop rotation and cover crops take longer to produce similar results. So, farmers can't get the same yields when the agrochemicals used are in short supply. We are facing a decade or longer where you will see some significant changes to our global food supply. If you are in a more affluent country, you may start to see this through a narrower production selection. Suddenly, there will be fewer choices in the food aisles. Clever merchandising will make the aisles appear full, but you will notice that your favorite brand may not be there anymore. In some extreme instances, there will be outright shortage. Sometimes this will occur even as supplies of agricultural raw materials appear in good supply. The result will be panic buying in some areas, which will further exacerbate the problems at the retail level. So what can you do to offset this significant society-altering downward trend that's happening? First and foremost, you've got to focus on your own food preparedness. If you don't have your 72-hour supply, you may not make it through the first significant disaster that comes your way. If you don't have your 3-week supply, you're likely not going to fare so well when the government can't come in to rescue you or the rest of your fellow citizens who are starting to panic. Ideally, you want at least, and this is where I tell people to start, go for 3 months of food, 6, 9 months, and work up to a year. Get that set up, and then additionally, at the same time, work on means to cook without electrical or natural gas coming from your municipal supplies that may not be available. Find the means to do that, and we cover that in a lot of videos on the channel. And look, that may sound extreme, but you can supplement and stretch that through long periods, building it when there's an opportunity to do so, and stretching it when there are short supplies. It may seem odd right now to pack 5-gallon buckets of rice, beans, and wheat berries, but that's 147,000 calories. And without supplementing any of these, that's 48 days of 3,000 calories per day. You could pack all that food away for less than $100 a day. Of course, you could have done that 2 years ago for probably about $50 or less. And next year, who knows? Perhaps that same amount of food will cost you $200. You should also look to bulk up the rest of your food supplies. At the very least, stocking up now will be a hedge against inflation. When it comes to offsetting what are guaranteed high costs in the future, you should also focus on your skills of cooking, preserving, pickling, and dehydrating, and growing your own food. Each of these will save you money in the long run, keep you fed with nutritionally dense food, and position you better to survive even the worst of the global food supply chain failing. I would encourage you to find local sources for food that are closer to home. And there's always a boutique, a small farm, or home gardener with a bumper crop of something despite what's happening in the rest of the world. And finally, I can't stress enough the need to grow some of your own food. This will be the critical future difference between surviving and thriving. And when you do this, consider growing non-traditional crops that have more biodiversity. As we've shown on this channel, sunchokes, sunflowers, many varieties of sweet potatoes, and even purslane are all great non-traditional foods. One batch of walking or potato onions will keep you perpetually in the supply of allium. One fruit or nut tree planted now will take a few years before you can get any meaningful harvest from it, but you will be glad in a few years that you took the time today. Remember that old Greek proverb, a society grows great when old men plant trees in the shade of which they're never going to sit. We're working behind the scenes on a series of videos to show how to grow food on an apartment balcony. If they haven't already come out by the time we release this video, but they're in the works. There's not a lot of good news for the global supply chain. It's something that I'm hesitant to talk about. I don't like this channel to be focused on the negative, but I do want to bring the reality so people can prepare. As dark as the future looks right now, we only see clouds gathering before the storm. Food prices, they've gone up across the board by slightly over 10% this year. Many foods have gone up a lot higher than that. And by 2023, we're likely going to see at least that much of an increase again, but I'll be the first to tell you that it will probably be much higher than that, no less than, I believe, 15%. Very possibly on the order of 20 or 30% higher based on some of the research that we've been seeing behind the scenes. So many of these input costs that go into bringing food to table keep increasing. That $5 loaf of bread right now, it could be $6 or more by this time next year. That $3 gallon of milk today could be over $4 by this time next year. And there's no avoiding it at this point. The dollar here and there increase, it's going to erode the economy further and complicate the growing food crisis even further. At the very least, it means far less food available to you and your table. And I believe that should be a wake-up call for action to you. Your food scarcity or insecurity in the future is going to really depend upon the decisions that you make and the actions that you take today. There really hasn't been in my life a more evident and pressing need to prep. Start with the videos on this channel on building a 2-week or 1-year food supply, wherever you're at, and work from there. Food scarcity, or food security rather, will be the luxury in the future if things continue as they are. So you really have to start today to strengthen your prepping, or at least start your prepping. In the coming years, you're going to be glad you did. Prepping is like investing. The best time to invest is 5 years ago. The second best time is today. In the coming years, you're going to be glad that you did. If you prep and nothing happens, you will still reap the benefits as a hedge against inflation. Still, I can honestly tell you that food insecurity will be coming to even the nicest of neighborhoods in the foreseeable future. As always, stay safe out there.